Hello everyone, welcome to SkillCapped. In this guide, we'll be opening up our strategy book from the PAX Arena Invitational. The PAX Arena Invitational was one of North America's largest recent tournaments, having all of the biggest esports organizations such as T1, TSM, Cloud9, 100 Thieves, and more. We'll be going over the most powerful and effective strategies and setups used by teams throughout this event, from new takes on standard executes on bind, to the unique utility used to close down split, and go over the latest refinements teams are using on Ascent. Whether you're grinding ranked solo trying to improve or running with your team and trying to coordinate new strats, this video will have something for you to start getting more kills and winning more games. But before we jump into it though, make sure to subscribe, hit that bell icon, and like the video to get more premium guides just like this one, with one goal in mind, helping you become a better player. We are starting out on Split. It is easily the least played and popular map in Valorant as of right now. It offers up stifling choke points to try and contest its attackers, and strong defenses can simply overwhelm games in a fashion quite similar to the old days of DE Nuke in CSGO. This means that trying our best to have good and well thought out attacking strategies can be even more important than on other maps. Throughout the tournament, there were only a few games played on Split, so there isn't a whole lot to delve into, but we'll be going over how to structure good default takes on A and B, as well as defensive setups for both Cypher and Viper, which was brought out in the 11th hour of the finals by C9's Tens, and showcased one of Valorant's most misfit agents at a pro level. So let's start on our first round today with Gen G vs Sentinels, Game 3 from the quarterfinals matchup. We find ourselves in round 3 with Sentinels trying to establish control after losing pistol round. The first gun round after a pistol loss can oftentimes be one of the most pivotal in the match. With Valorant's MR12 format, the halves are noticeably shorter, especially if you come from a Counter-Strike background, and thus losing gun rounds hurt significantly more because of a lack of time to manage economy in the same way, leading to less overall opportunities to get proper full buys in. Here's an overview of how the take will be executed. The round starts and Omen tosses his smokes for screens. This is the smoke that takes the longest to deploy and is most necessary to cover possible operators, marshals, or resident scream enthusiasts with vandals. Omen follows up with a smoke for A Heaven as the team begins pushing through A main. Jet tosses her first smoke onto ramp to cover them as they do so. As the team pushes through A main, Raze is swinging to take the fight, clearing Cubby and then looking towards elbow or sight as Omen uses his paranoia to cross sight and stun elbow. This allows Sentinels to get their first pick. The other part of this take that is cool is how Cypher is essentially bolstering Omen's smokes by using one of his Cypher cages on the Heaven smoke in case someone is getting cheeky and wanting to push through. The other cage is used to cut off elbow in case of other enemies in there while they secure sight and get the plant down. Sentinels secure sight inside of 15 seconds and enter the post plant really strongly. My favorite part of this strat and an overlooked thing in lower levels of play is what Jet does. Jet stays here in A main and chains their smokes to continually cut off the ramp flank while they alternate between launching it and sewers. While an often easy to predict flank, sewers to A main can be very strong in a coordinated retake because of how it splits the angles of the attackers defending the spike, so paying attention and dedicating someone to thoroughly neutralize it is key in my opinion. And from here, it's just a very strong post plant hold by Sentinels and honestly a very sloppy push from Gen G. If you look closely, the Gen G Raze seems to misclick a satchel charge right as they begin their push out of screens. I don't think it ultimately mattered, but it was definitely less coordinated than what Sentinels were doing themselves this round. We are jumping into the very next round in this series, and we are going to watch how Sentinels deal with one of the hardest defensive setups in Valorant. Make no mistake, despite how Sentinels counter this setup, the Cypher rollout for B-side on Split is legit a must-have strategy for any Cypher player out there, and here's how to do it. What we are going to be doing here is setting up and abusing one-way smokes. For those less familiar, the concept of one-way smokes is a setup utility like Cypher cages, Brimstone smokes, Jet smokes, Omen smokes, Viper smokes if you are the one Viper main in the audience. Anyway, take a smoke utility, set it up in such a way that it creates an angle that is highly advantageous for you but hard for the enemies on the other side to respond, and you have a one-way. There are one-way setups across all of the maps in Valorant, but the most useful ones in my opinion are found on Split, and we're going to show you how to set up to hold B as Cypher utilizing this setup. At the start of the round, move towards B site and use your first tripwire inside of B garage. Now walk up to this location and use this lineup to throw one cage into the one-way spot. Thankfully, with the recent changes to Cypher's cages, if you mess it up, you can pick up and try again. Once it's in the spot, move towards the plant area and deploy your camera here, and your second cage here. Cage 2 is meant to split the sight lines you need to cover should the attackers get out of garage. Finally, put your last tripwire here to disrupt the default plant should you lose the sight. Here's what the one-way cage looks like once deployed, and you see the strength of it right away. From backside you can simply shoot above where the legs are and have a highly advantageous fight. Seems hard to counter, right? Well, if you can coordinate like Sentinels, you can still blow through this hold and execute a fast B take. This take really boils down to exploiting a concept I call funneling. Let's jump to the overhead view to see what it looks like. So the strength of playing B on split as a defender is how you can juggle between very different angles really fast on top of the many angles that attackers need to check to begin with. Mikhail's spot here behind pillar allows him to quickly juggle between these angles to mess with people pushing into the site, and it can create a stressful guessing game because if you take too long to flush this player out, suddenly you're exposed to defenders in heaven or from alley. So an ideal attack would force him to commit to one angle only, and that's what we call funneling. Sentinels execute it this way. They use Jet's dash to instantly neutralize the B garage tripwire and immediately pull Mikhail's focus towards the plant area. He also procs both his cages instantly because he knows the Jet is deep inside already. To confirm that, Raze uses her Roomba to make sure Mikhail can peek back towards the lower lane. This pushes him into an engagement with Jet, which he's unable to win. The other parts of this take are really simple. Omen smokes towards heaven help alleviate the hard to fight angles there, and really, all this take needed was one Jet dash to blow open the site. This take from Sentinels really shows classic NA tendencies that you would see all the time in Counter-Strike. Play very standard default takes and just explode into sites and go for the aim duels to win your rounds. Not to say that North American Valorant doesn't have complex executes and great strat makers, but the North American style is generally marked by a looser, more aim-heavy playstyle. Now, we're going to split up the pace of this video for a second, and instead of focusing on a specific round, talk about how in the finals, in a must-win map to not get knocked out, Cloud9 revealed their ultimate trap card, the Viper Split Pick. I don't think I need to elaborate why this was so crazy. Viper has the lowest pick rate in pro play, has the lowest pick rate in general play, and to see her whipped out at a crucial moment is wild. So with that, I want to focus on the cool one-way setups and weird ultimate strategies that TenZ utilize throughout this map. And instead of doing all of those rounds, we're going to go shotgun here and quickly go over them for all you Viper mains out there. Alright, so we're going to quickly go over the one-way Viper smokes that TenZ used throughout his defensive half. Starting on the A side, TenZ will switch between two one-ways for ramp control. The first one, further towards top ramp using this lineup. This one gives you another kneecap or express to dust ramp pushes, and if you want to grab the smoke back for some reason, you can do so like this. The further back one goes above the A heaven door and limits attacker sightlines in a similar way. Definitely more defensively oriented, and TenZ would essentially play deep heaven with this smoke and not push up ramp except for an intel play early on. Here is that lineup. And sometimes this one isn't re-grabbable, so if you want it back, you just have to kind of jump and hope. These setups are very strong for A site, and combining with the new wall mechanics, you can set up a great Viper defense on A now by walling here into A main. Now let's move to B, where I have to be honest here, we only get a brief glimpse of TenZ lining up this bonkers one-way, and it legit took me the better part of an hour to find and recreate the lineup, but here it is. I'm going to line up on this crack in the floor here, and then this lineup will differ depending on your crosshair, but I would try to mirror where the center of my crosshair is and crouch throw. This one will take a bit of practice, but just look at the results. This one-way makes Cyphers look next to worthless. It's definitely a bit inconsistent, but if you can nail it first try, it's deadly. Now let's move on to the cool ultimate usage we saw C9 utilize a few times. Now, the coolest thing we saw C9 do is offer up potentially a whole new Pandora's box of strats around Viper's Pit Ultimate. To this point, one of the biggest problems of playing Viper was just how niche her ultimate tended to be, especially at normal levels of play. It felt like it was either typecast into plant the spike and pop for the post plant, or on defense popping it to go for the big retake or defuse. So it makes sense that it would be very odd to see TenZ starting out a round with his ultimate ready to pop outside of A main. Watch what he does here. He drops the Viper Pit so that it covers A main and spreads out into the site, creating a smoke lane for his teammates to pass through to make a big push onto the site. Now this strat goes colossally bad because of how Sentinels play around it, but just the idea of creating your own lane with the Viper Pit is incredibly innovative. I think this is a concept worth exploring, and I'm curious to see if there are ways to use Viper's Pit in this way to facilitate other pushes or defenses on other maps. Alright. Our Viper utility showcase is over. Let's get on to the most successful strat I saw C9 execute with Viper during this game. We find ourselves on round 9, and C9 are currently down 8-0 on their elimination match in this tournament and are forced to eco. At this point, getting any kind of leverage going into the second half isn't just necessary. If they don't get it, C9 will be losing this series. And when we boil it down, C9 are facing an issue we have all ran into. The defense feels impenetrable. Everywhere you go, every strat you pull out, you are just getting dusted and wiped out without your adversaries breaking a sweat. This phenomena is magnified by how hard it can be to even get an ounce of a foothold on split to begin with. So how do you attempt to break through in this situation? Well, for C9 at least, they threw a complete curveball strat at Sentinels to get the advantage they need to break into B site. Look at how Sentinels are set up here. They start with 3 towards A, 1 mid, 1 B. But early on, C9 exerts some map pressure by launching their Viper smoke onto mid stairs to cut off the rope room heaven line of sight. This causes a shift right away into Sentinel defense. Sage immediately starts hauling ass, has an Omen smoke, and a weird Viper wall are deployed onto B. Watch the shift here on the minimap. Raze pulls off mid and holds in heaven, Cypher backs up deeper in sight, and Sage comes in to reinforce. This Viper wall is so weird at first glance. It honestly looks like something a defending Viper would deploy to buy time on site. Like, what does it gain you? It doesn't allow you to walk onto site by cutting off back pillar and heaven. It doesn't go from spawn into heaven. It's not a standard wall in any way. What it does do, however, is really confuse the defense. And this is intentional. What's going to happen for the next little bit is C9 will give very few cues to Sentinels outside of a little jiggle peek Roomba drop from Raze, while Tens is just going to sit in this corner and toggle the wall on and off periodically. He does it 3 or 4 times, and each time the wall goes up, you can just watch the minimap, the Sentinel defenders just turn and look. Sentinels are forced to respect that one moment the wall is up, and then it comes down with 5 players on site. That is something definitely possible given how suppressed they are of intel currently. This whole time, the juggling of the wall is allowing C9 to creep 2 players up mid for the big pincer B push. And just watch how this plays out. Tens puts up the wall for one last time and leaves it up longer than previously. This baits out Sinatra to use his Raze grenade for 0 damage done, and also pulls his focus off of heaven at a critical moment, allowing the flanking players to be able to get a frag. On site, the wall goes down immediately, and suddenly the site is swarmed with pistol players everywhere. Out of nowhere, by just messing with the defense with a Viper wall, C9 pull an eco win out of nowhere and do it in concise fashion, walking away with 4 players alive. It's just awesome to see the redeploy functionality of Viper's utility used in such a way that it can be a continual way of messing with the defenders' heads. I just want to see more pro Viper now, because the opportunities you can open up are some of the most unique in Valorant, and Tens showed us that quite a lot in this game. Moving on to our second map today, we are back at good old Bind, and we are jumping right back to the quarterfinal series between Sentinels and Gen G, and we are starting on round 6 where we find a must-have standard Cypher setup for hookah control, as well as how to use shooting through smokes to its highest efficacy. Now, there's no more important thing for you to have in your defensive playbook than a quality hookah setup. Let's take a look at how Dapper plays it as a Cypher. The round starts, and we don't see it exactly, but we can use the minimap to get an idea of his full setup. Dapper takes advantage of the vertical tripwire for the hookah jump into sight. This trap is awesome because of how it takes advantage of the weird momentum mechanics when you land any trap. Should someone yeet themselves out the window, they will get caught midair and rubber banded back against the wall of hookah, holding them even more in place than traditional horizontal tripwires. With that, he jumps into hookah and deploys his camera into the back right corner. The only thing we can't know definitively is whether he favors this camera high up or down low, but it's not the biggest deal, and either spot is quite nice because of how it forces attackers to look very offline compared to any spots that a defender can be, which is nice. He then places his final cage and final trap into the hookah entrance hall. This is simply to disrupt and push back the attackers if needed. What's so nice about this is the ability to both play inside of hookah and get aggressive towards market, or play on site and use your camera for the intel. So let's watch how Dapper plays around this setup. The round starts with him going for a simple jump peek out towards market. What I like about this is it's just a simple intel play, but it can give you a nice early lead in reading the attackers. Dapper gets this intel and backs up a bit while his teammates on long spot 2 attackers via the Sova Owl drone. The volley cuts back to Dapper having used his first Cypher cage because of the offensive pressure shown there. He's already backing out when the brimstone smoke comes down into hookah. What I like is how instead of playing in standard spots on site, Dapper hops up on tube so that he can hold this off angle. One of the things that I feel people don't practice enough is how to effectively shoot through smokes. It's one thing to just flail and hope you catch a dome, but if you can properly visualize the angle and pay attention to timings, you can turn it into a much higher probability of catching a free pick. Dapper hears the Phoenix flash in and instantly starts spamming into the smoke, knowing that people have to be pushing in to follow up on that flash. He catches GMD perfectly and what follows next is perfect. If you are a Counter-Strike player like me, one of the harder concepts to get adjusted to is managing the ultimate economy. When Dapper gets this pick, he knows two things. 1. Genji have a Sage res ready, and 2. He can't regain the hookah control to deny this, so he hops in his camera to spot out when the res gets popped, and asks his teammate, Zoms, to have a Hellfire ready to immediately counter that play. The timing is perfect. The res goes up and GMD immediately goes back down again. At this point, Genji are just like, you know, hookah is overrated. We're just gonna go long, and they end up getting destroyed by Sentinels, and the round really never got started for them because of how strongly Dapper was able to hold this area with his Cypher utility. A considerable portion of my previous video talked about my dislike of the standard A execute on Bind utilizing stage walls to cut off sight and get a free truck plant. You can imagine my happiness when, during this Sentinels Gen G match, I saw them execute this play. The round starts with Gen G heavily split, 2 players towards showers and the remaining 3 with the spike towards long B. I'm not sure if the intent from Gen G was to pull A rotates and go for a B hit, or if this was how they wanted to play this round regardless, but the round opens up with a trade of intel utility between both Sovas on long B, giving Sentinels the location of 2 attackers there, while simultaneously their Sage on A makes contact with the 2 people in showers. At this point, Sentinels get ballsy and call for a rotate and a stack for the A site just as Genji begin to rotate their B players towards A short. On the surface, this looks like a disaster waiting to happen for Genji as they unknowingly walk right into the majority of the defense entrenched on A site. Let's go overhead here and see how the defense are set to hold against this site push. We see Sinatra and Phoenix by the boxes on site. Sick and Zoms are both dug into U-Haul, with Sick also ready to fast rotate to B if necessary, and finally it's our boy Dapper in heaven, so pushing out onto A, Genji have to deal with a minimum of 3 angles of attack from the defense, 4 if Sick should choose to swing wide from truck to fire at short A. And what does Genji do here? Instead of just walling truck and isolating the hookah fights, they choose instead to isolate the fights on site with this setup. Genji used their owl drone to scout the close corner by short, and once the drone is picked off, they start moving. They smoke heaven and deep into A link as their Sage deploys her wall to cut off the teleporter side exit of U-Haul. Already, within a matter of seconds, Genji went from these angles to worry about contesting to just sight. They created gaps to isolate defenders into less favorable fights, and watch how it plays out. GMD comes out fast showers backed up by Mikhail as their teammates come down short fast. One of the things I like most here is watch Effie's on Sage. Instead of going right for the plant, he takes a swing towards U-Haul to make sure he won't get ganked while planting. Always a smart move, and I love the commitment to getting full site control first. What I end up loving most about this take is how well it deals with my biggest problem with other variants of a short A execute, and that's too much site control for the defense. Look at the position Sentinels are in as the spike goes down. They have 2 players essentially locked in U-Haul because of the showers push by GMD. They have Cypher in heaven waiting for the smokes to clear, and then there's Sova coming on the long flake into showers. There isn't space for them to regroup because look at the attackers. They know that GMD is on site and ready to pinch U-Haul. These 2 players are forced to push out towards short and take the fights alone essentially. Granted, they do a good job of crossfiring from heaven to get Effie's after Zoms picks off player 1, but at this point it's too little too late. GMD just creeps up on Zoms and gets the pick and U-Haul control, leaving Dapper and Shazam in isolated positions in a 2v3 retake. It goes how you would expect, and Genji take the round with one of my new favorite strats to take A control. Here, we see how Sentinels got to the point of being one of the best Ascent teams in Valorant. This is their standard B take, and those air quotes are heavy because of just how meticulously coordinated this take ends up being. The strat starts off with this absolutely nuts Sova setup from Sinatra. He's attempting to land 2 shock darts at the same time in the same spot to insta-frag players standing in the speed lane on B site. It's incredibly creative, but I feel like for regular players it'll be hard to find uses for it. It really relies on knowing how the defense sets up, so if you get to a point in your game where you figured out the defensive setups, then busting this out for a one-time long con could be devastating. To line it up, you want to stand on top of this grate here, and then the vertical lineup is a bit dependent on crosshair style, but I was looking at the tip of this cloud as my height reference. From there, it's a 2-bar charge. Shoot the shock dart, then immediately turn, pull out your second shot dart, and the lineup here is pretty forgiving, but it's roughly as high as this wire against this building. It's a 1-bar charge and a 1 bounce. The timing here takes some practice, but it's kind of like shoot the first dart and while lining up number 2, it's a brief pause. So, once your Sova has exited the 4th dimension, it's time to execute the rest of the push. Sentinels don't get a frag off the shock dart, but it baits out the first Omen smoke from the defense, which allows them to safely creep up B main to get ready for their main take. Here, Sentinels are going to combo an Omen smoke, a breach aftershock, and this Sage wall to funnel defenders into a fight they can't win. Watch out, player 1 has no chance here. The coordination is perfect. Omen smokes defender spawn, the aftershock pushes player 1 off stairs right as Sage peeps through the B main window. With this peek, Sentinels start flooding the site using Cypher cages to keep spawn under control while they isolate the fights on Market and the final site defender. Admittedly, this is a hard take to coordinate, but I think if you and your premates can practice it, is one of the best ways to blow open the B site I've seen yet. For you solo players, I think parts of the strat will help you in your play as well. Stuff like how Sage doesn't wall up to window until the team is starting to push instead of just popping it early, getting the most out of it. Breach players, this is easily one of the best aftershock locations in the entire game because of how often stairs is played. And you Sova players out there who are looking to ascend to new levels of weird lineups, start integrating that shock setup. Journeying back to the finals, I want to talk about an interesting subject, and that's attacker variance. One of the hardest habits to break I've found is running the same or similar strat too many times, especially if it's working. I think we've all been there. You take a site effortlessly, just dominate your way through, and because you're hyped, you're like, yo, guys, let's just run it back. They can't stop us. And maybe that works for 2 or 3 rounds, but if you don't shake up the pace, you could be walking into a massive response from the defenders. I love how aware Sentinels are of this. In the previous few rounds, they were abusing the fact that C9 liked to set up their defense with basically no mid control. They were conceding mid to be able to better reinforce the sites, and this let Sentinels just abuse all of that map control to run effective splits to blast open the sites regardless. We'll talk more about defensive setups on Ascent in a bit, but it's important to take a look at how this round shakes out. Here, C9 are going to commit 3 players to push now and take a mid control back from Sentinels, but the problem is going to be Sentinels not wanting mid control this round to begin with. C9 start off by using an Omen smoke from Relics to block mid link as he and Shinobi push out into courtyard, looking only at top mid because Tens is holding link with an op from catwalk. So C9 got mid control. But where are the attackers? Look at the minimap. Zoms is playing link and immediately sees a smoke that C9 haven't used at all this game and calls out that he can't get into mid. Meanwhile, his teammates are set up to play for an A push from the start, and it's only this call to pull Shazam off and to watch the mid flank. By now, if you look at the minimap, you can see the issues with what C9 have done. Look at their potential site control right now. It's 1 person each, and because they haven't gotten value yet out of this mid push, they've just left themselves open to being exploited. Shazam pokes his head out mid and spots Shinobi below catwalk and starts scrapping with him, and after some pokes and prods, he gets the frag on Shinobi through the wall. But at the same time, while Shazam is causing a huge distraction in mid, look at the minimap. The other A players use a Sova drone to spot the only defender on A and immediately go for the 2v1 fight for site control. At this point, C9 have failed in their attempt to take mid control. I think the big problem is they didn't really do anything with it. But again, we'll go deeper on that in just a moment. I think the big takeaway here is, don't get too greedy with your attacking strats. Sentinels knew when to back off the gas and were able to totally deke C9 for all of you baseball players out there. Alright, so let's jump back to the quarterfinals to look at mid aggression done more effectively. TSM and Envy are trading blows back and forth right now, but a big thing is TSM also favored a more passive mid style, and in the same way C9 did, they are ready to take some of that map space back. Mid is undoubtedly one of the hardest areas to control in all of Valorant, and looking at a top-down view of the map we can see why that is and why if you can succeed it can be so beneficial. If you look at Ascent from this perspective, controlling mid on defense creates a few advantages. Firstly is it shuts down the alternative lanes into the bomb sites. Market on B is no longer accessible and Tree Room on A is as well. It turns sites that can be easily blown open through effective split takes into meat grinder chokes that force attackers to get creative, lucky, or just be better than you to get out onto the site. Secondly, it opens up fast flanking opportunities to stymie pushes early via mid link to B or bottom mid to A. The problem with mid control is the size of the area you have to take. It's easy to cut off the lanes for defenders to push out of, and if you do smoke mid and push out as defense, it can be hard to hold because of how far separated the main attacker peaks are. So taking mid control often requires 2 or even 3 people, and as we saw in the previous round, if you don't get value out of this mid control, you're opening a huge vulnerability in your site defenses as C9 experiences firsthand later in this tournament. So our round starts here, and Hayes uses his Omen smoke here onto mid link and teleports out to the catwalk stairs. For those of you who don't know, if you tuck in behind these stairs and crouch, attackers at top mid are unable to see you. With his teammate backing him up in bottom mid, Hayes holds for attackers to get frisky and push out of the smoke into courtyard. Here's another thing you should be aware of. If you're calling for a resmoke, learn your smoke timings and try to call it before the original smoke clears. If you can do this, you can keep up the consistent chain of vision denial and not have that brief gap from deploy times. Takes a little bit of coordination, but it can be so very helpful as it is here for TSM. Another thing is, learn to respond to wallbangs or pre-fires through smokes. Watch how Sabrosa is able to get a relatively free frag because of his knowledge to know to respond to this with his own pre-fires. This goes into a general tip, which is learn your pre-fires. Learn how to understand angles through smokes. It's something that can actually give you quite a lot of free kills and also lets you exercise relatively safe pressure. So this frag by Sabrosa causes a mistake by Envy. They think that TSM are holding mid passively as had been their habit. Once again, studying tendencies is a concept I will continue to bring up because it's always important. So they push up to get some forward mid control to respond to the pick and just waltz into the loving arms of Hazed. TSM's simple execution of mid control has netted them 2 duty-free frags and an incredible amount of map control. As Hayes goes to retreat, another MV player tries to regress at top middle and does find one TSM player, but is traded out very fast by Sabrosa, leaving TSM with the big player advantage and 3 picks gained from their proactive mid-control play. They will go on to win the round, and this change of base and going for mid-control on Ascent was vital in them doing so. And that's all we have for today. What strats from this video are you guys most excited to try? Let us know in the comments down below. And while you're down there, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to get more premium guides like this one with one goal in mind, helping you become a better player. We here at SkillCapped want to thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.